as part of the Seder HaTfilah for Chag Sukkot. So we have one section which we call hashanot. And that is a section of Tfilah that was introduced after the Churban Bayis Sheni, and it was introduced as a remembrance to the Beis HaMikdash. There are many things that are included in our customs and prayer services that are Zecher LaMikdash, to remind ourselves of what happened in the Beis HaMikdash, to remind ourselves that there will be a Beis HaMikdash, and to fan the flames of hope that we will somehow be able to see it. So we had, for instance, in the Yom HaKippurim, we had the entire avoda, or the record of the service of the Kohen Gadol on Yom HaKippurim, recorded for us in the Musaf Shemona Esrei, in the Chazaras HaShatz of the Musaf Shemona Esrei. So that was done by the Rabbonim after the Churban Bayis, so that they would remember. And so there are many things. I mean, on Pesach we have Zecher LaMikdash Ki Hillel. We remember what Hillel did when the Beis HaMikdash was stood. So that is also a reminder of the Beit HaMikdash. There are many things that are Zecher LaMikdash. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah lists for us 9 takonot of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was alive at the time of the Churban Bayis, and he survived it, and he reestablished the Sanhedrin in Yavne, the yeshiva in Yavne, and since Ram Gamliel was the Nasi, so Ram Gamliel went into hiding because he was afraid that the Romans would execute him, since he was, then the Roman policy was to execute the leaders of the people. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was a Kohen, and he was not from the family of Hillel, and he was not from the Nisim, he became the de facto Nasi after the Churban Bayis, and he continued for about 20 years, and then Ram Gamliel came back, and with Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya and the others, and they were really, to a great extent, Talmidim of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai instituted many takonos, 9, most of whom were Zecher LaMikdash, most of whom were that we should remember the Beis HaMikdash. And some of them were based on the idea that Mocha Yiboneh HaMikdash, the Beis HaMikdash could be built tomorrow. And that's a machlokes in the Rishonim, what he meant by that. So the traditional view is that of Rashi, and that view we say on Tisha B'Av, Ki ba'eish yitzata v'eish hatosid livnosa, that a fiery Beis HaMikdash will descend from heaven. We won't have to do anything. So that naturally became the popular view. We like a Beis HaMikdash that we don't have to do anything. But the Meiri says there that Mocha Yiboneh HaMikdash, he says we have to build a Beis HaMikdash, and that the Beis HaMikdash will be built by human beings. So they'll have to let out bids and contracts and get a Chinese architect to design it. So then that will be Mocha, but the concept of Mocha Yiboneh HaMikdash exists in halacha, and is therefore all customs that could have been made, or all halachas that could have been made. For instance, we take the lulav 7 days. It's really 6, but we take it all of the Yontiv of Sukkot, even though the din min HaTorah is only by Yom Lakachtem Lachem by Yom Rishon, only yesterday, and this is all midrabbanans, and therefore, even if some of the Daled Minim are not exactly kosher, you can use them in Chalamot, etc., etc. But that's all. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was masaken that since in the Beis Hamikdash they celebrated 7 days and they took the lulav 7 days, so now even though we're in exile and we're not in the Beis Hamikdash, we're also going to do it 7 days so that it will be, so to speak, familiar with the fact that in the Beis Hamikdash they took it all 7 days. And those are all very interesting takonot because of the fact that they all came to reinforce the same idea that Mocha Yiboneh Hamikdash, and therefore the customs of the Beis Hamikdash have to be fresh by us. So one of the customs in the Beis Hamikdash that the Gemara in Sukkah records for us was that they made hakofos around the Mizbeach, and that this was part of the service of the Beis Hamikdash. And so therefore, after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, and there was no more Beis Hamikdash, so therefore already, now it's a question, it was probably introduced in Eretz Yisrael already, not in Bavel. We will discuss in a minute the piyutim that we have. Are they from Eretz Yisrael or are they from Bavel? But the custom of hashanot, of taking out a Sefer Torah and standing in the middle bima, and that the kohol should walk around it, march around it, that's a Zecher L'Mikdash. And therefore it became part of the entire service of Sukkot, and observed everywhere. Now, just to march around it, that's not, we have to dress up the custom a little. You always have to make it attractive to people. Chazal were great people at understanding what motivates people and what inspires people. So therefore there arose the custom of reciting a piyut for the march around the bima. Now, the piyutim that we have, so there were 3 great paitonim in the post-temple period. So one was the Kalir, Rebbe Eliezer Kalir. Taisus identifies him with Rebbe Eliezer ben Shimon as though he were a Tana. But most of the Rishonim disagree, and they said he was a Jew that was born in Egypt, he lived in Eretz Yisrael, then lived in Bavel. And the question is, why is he called HaKalir? And on that there are all sorts of legends. But he's the most prolific of all of the Paitonim we have. He wrote piyutim for every Shabbos of the year. In many kehilot that came from the Middle East, they still say his piyutim for every Shabbos. And then he wrote the piyutim for every Chag. So here we've done away with piyutim. Mainly the influence of the Gaon of Vilna and the yeshiva world. But even I remember as a child in my father's shul in Chicago, they used to say all the piyutim. It was like an hour's worth of piyutim. And nobody knew a word that they were saying. But they were happy. And then there were piyutim for Ma'ariv, and piyutim for Shachris, and piyutim for Musaf. Now, the only place that piyutim have really survived by us is on the Yom Noraim. There's on Pesach, the piyut, the Brach Dodi, has also survived in most Kehillas. But otherwise, the trend is away from that. Okay, so Hanach Lehem Yisrael. But the Kalir was the great Paitan. Now there was a Paitan in Eretz Yisrael by the name of Yanai. And he also wrote piyutim for everything. He was not as popular as the Kalir. I think part of the reason is because he came later, so it looked like he was just imitating. And because of that, therefore, many kehillas have some piyutim of Yana. The third group of paitonim were the Ashkenazim. So Rashi, for instance, wrote piyutim. But Rashi's piyutim we have up for slichus and for kinus. And one of his piyutim, we have Rashi's piyut that we recite in our slichus yet. So we don't think of Rashi as a paita. But it seemed that in the Middle Ages, in that time, if you were a Talmud Chacham and if you were a Rav, you had to write a piyut. You had to write piyut, and that was part of the job description. And again, that has evaporated. It no longer is present. So we have, for instance, the difficulty to having an adequate kina for the Shoah. So the Bavur Rebbe wrote one, other Schwab wrote, other people wrote, but they're not professional paitonim. Now, the Hoshinas that we have are all piyutim. And you'll notice they all follow a certain basic pattern. They all are alphabetical. Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet. Even Shasiya, Beis Abchira, Goren Ornon, Dviram Utzna, Har Yeroeh. They all go by the Aleph base. And there's a meter there. There's a rhythm. And in many kehillas, they were put to music, song, melody. That's before people had to go to work in the morning. So that I remember, for instance, a shyness that could take a half hour every time because they would sing them. And the shyness every piyut has a theme. So yesterday's theme was Laman Amitoch. We say to the Rebbeinu Shalom, you save us, Hoshana, for your sake. And then we list all the things that are for your sake. Today's Hoshana, Heaven Shasiya, is a recollection of the Beis Hamikdash of Yerushalayim. All of the adjectives that we can think of to describe Yerushalayim and the Beis Hamikdash. Again, in alphabetical order. And then we're going to have Kalim Moshos. They're all of them. Now, there are more than there are days. And because of that, therefore, a custom arose, and it depends what day of Sukkot the first day is. If it's on a Monday, then we say these ones. If it's on a Thursday, then we say other ones, because we try to include them all, so that over the period, the span of time, everybody will get his piyut recited. And our Shana Rabbah, we recite them all. and they become the basic building blocks of the prayer service on Hoshana Rabbah. Hoshana Rabbah, we add piyutim again, but again, you'll notice all the piyutim are alphabetical in order. And that was made so that you would remember, because there was a time that you didn't have printed Sidurim. The people, so it had to have memory. And we find that even in the davening, it's alphabetical. They purposely made it alphabetical so that those of us that have some associative memory would be able to recite it even if they did not have the text in front of them. So these piyutim, that became part of the Hoshanas, and that became part of the Yontav of Sukkos. There'll probably be new piyutim. So work on it. Rabbi Chananya ben Akashi Omer Hotza Kodesh Baruch Hu L'Zakos Yisrael L'Ficha Yomer Lem Torah Mitzvos Shenemar Adonai Chavhei Tzaman Tzidko Yagdil Tova V'Yadir.